Mamiko Tanaka has stood beside Shohei Ohtani through everything. Through the surgeries and the recoveries and the relentless pressure of being the partner of the most scrutinized athlete on the planet. She has done it with the quiet dignity that defines her public presence. Composed. Controlled. Present without performing. But when she saw him after the 2-hour surgery, something crossed her face that she couldn't pull back in time. Horror is a strong word. But it was the word the people in that corridor used when they described what they witnessed. Not distress. Not worry. Not the manageable concern of someone receiving difficult news they had mentally prepared themselves to receive. Horror. And in the hours that followed, as the MRI results came out, as the detailed medical records were released, as images of the bruising spread across every platform with a sports section, the rest of the world began to understand exactly what Mamiko had seen in that first moment. And why she couldn't hide it. The surgery had lasted 2 hours. That detail alone should have told people something. The original framing around Ohtani's knee procedure had carried language that implied brevity. A drainage. A standard intervention. The kind of thing that happens and resolves and gets filed away as a minor chapter in a long season. 2 hours is not a minor chapter. 2 hours in an operating room means complexity. It means that what the surgical team encountered when they went in did not match the scope of what they had planned for when they went in. It means adjustments were made. Decisions that weren't on the pre-surgical checklist. A procedure that expanded to accommodate a reality that the preoperative imaging had not fully revealed. Roberts sat down. He did not look like a man delivering good news. The MRI results came first. Roberts read from them in the careful, measured cadence of a man who understands that the words he is about to say will be transcribed and broadcast and replayed and analyzed in a dozen languages before the night is over. He did not editorialize. He did not soften. He read what the MRI showed with the directness of someone who had made a decision, somewhere in the previous 2 hours, that the time for careful organizational messaging had passed. What the MRI revealed went beyond the knee inflammation that had been the public face of this story for weeks. The imaging showed structural involvement that the earlier scans had not captured with sufficient clarity. Tissue. Not just fluid. Not just the inflammation that could be drained and managed and monitored with the confident language of routine intervention. Something deeper. Something that had been there, quiet and accumulating, while the public story remained one of manageable precaution. A reporter asked Roberts when the organization had first become aware of the full picture. Roberts paused for 3 full seconds before answering. That pause was its own answer. "We have a clearer picture now than we did before," he said. "That's what I can tell you tonight." The detailed medical records followed the MRI announcement by less than an hour. That speed was itself unusual. Medical records in these situations typically travel through layers of organizational review before reaching the public domain. Legal counsel. Communications staff. Front office sign-off. The machinery of institutional message management that exists precisely to control the pace at which difficult information reaches the outside world. This time, the records came fast. Which meant someone inside the organization had decided that the story of what those records contained was going to come out regardless, and that releasing them on the organization's terms, quickly and completely, was preferable to having them emerge piece by piece through leaks and sources and the particular chaos of a story that gets away from the people trying to manage it. What the records showed made clear why the decision had been made to move quickly. The bruising documented in those records was extensive. The images that accompanied them, clinical photographs taken in the immediate aftermath of the procedure, showed the kind of post-surgical presentation that stops people. Not because it is unusual in the context of what had been done, but because the visual reality of it is simply harder to absorb than the clinical language used to describe it. Those images spread online within minutes of the record's release. And within minutes of that, the word that kept appearing in comments sections and group chats and broadcast segments across 3 continents was the same word the people in the corridor had used when they described Mamiko's expression. She had been there the entire 2 hours. That detail emerged gradually, through the accounts of people who had been present in the hospital. Mamiko had not stepped away. had not retreated to a waiting area with a phone and the particular suspended animation of someone killing time while hoping for good news. She had been as close as she was permitted to be for the full duration of the procedure, and when it was over, she had been among the first people brought in. What she encountered was her husband. Conscious. Present. In the way that people are present in the immediate aftermath of surgery, aware of where they are and who is there, but still partly in the particular fog of anesthesia wearing off, of a body that has just been worked on and is only beginning to register the full scope of what has been done to it. And the bruising. The images that the medical records would later show to the world. The accounts of people who were in that corridor describe her expression changing the moment she saw him. Something moving across her face before she could arrange it into the composure that has been her public armor throughout everything this year has asked of her. Something unguarded and genuine and too fast to intercept. She moved to his side. She took his hand. Whatever passed between them in those first moments was private in the way that only the most important moments are private, witnessed by others but belonging entirely to the two people at the center of it. But her face had already said what her words didn't need to. Ohtani's first words, when they came, were not what anyone in that room had hoped to hear. He had been asked, gently, by one of the medical staff present, in the careful way you ask someone who has just come out of 2 hours of surgery whether they are ready to receive information about what comes next, how he was feeling. Whether he understood what had been found. Whether he had questions. He was quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that isn't confusion but consideration. The kind that people who know him well recognize as the space he creates before he says something he means completely. Then, I need to undergo treatment again. Not a question. Not a request for clarification about what the surgical findings meant or what the timeline looked like or what the organization was planning. A statement. Delivered with the flat certainty of a man who had already processed the information and arrived at the only conclusion that mattered to him. Not, what does this mean for the season? Not, when can I pitch again? Not any of the questions that the baseball world was going to spend the next 24 hours frantically trying to answer. I need to undergo treatment again. Roberts, when told of Ohtani's words, did not respond immediately. He looked down at the table in front of him. A reporter near the front of the room said later that the expression on his face in that moment was one she hadn't seen on him before. Something that looked, if you were watching closely enough, like the weight of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and had just felt it get heavier. When he spoke, his voice was steady. But the steadiness had the quality of something maintained rather than something natural. That's Shohei, he said. You tell him what the situation is and he tells you what he's going to do about it. He doesn't ask how to feel about it. He doesn't need time to get there. He's already there. He paused. That's what makes him who he is. And right now, tonight, watching him in that room, I'll tell you, it's also what breaks your heart a little. The medical community responded to the released records with a particular language of expertise encountering something that gives it pause. Specialists who were contacted by broadcasters and publications in the hours after the release used phrases like, more complex than initially presented, and, the extent of the involvement is notable, and, the recovery implications will need to be carefully assessed. None of them were willing to draw a straight line between what the records showed and a specific timeline. Medicine doesn't work in straight lines, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. But the picture that emerged from every conversation, every background briefing, every carefully worded expert opinion was consistent in its direction if not its specifics. This was not going to be simple. This was not going to be fast. And the version of Shohei Ohtani that the Dodgers had built their October plans around, the two-way force of nature who had carried a franchise on his back through a season of extraordinary production, was going to look different by the time this chapter closed than it had looked when it opened. The bruise images continued to spread. That was the thing about them. They had a quality that clinical language doesn't. Medical records can be filtered through expertise and context and the reassuring vocabulary of professionals who deal with difficult things every day. Images of bruising on the knee and leg of the greatest baseball player alive cannot be filtered. They exist in their full unmediated reality, and what they communicate does not require translation. People who had watched Ohtani hit baseballs into the night sky during the home run derby looked at those images and felt the distance between those two realities as something almost physical. Same man. Same leg. Different story. Mamiko was photographed leaving the hospital late that evening. She walked with the careful posture of someone who is very aware of being watched and has decided, as a matter of dignity, to give the cameras nothing that belongs to her. But there was something in her eyes that the cameras caught anyway. Not grief. Not fear. Something older and quieter than either of those things. The expression of someone who has processed a difficult truth and arrived at the other side of the processing and is now simply carrying it. She had seen him first. Before the MRI results and the medical records and the bruise images and Robert's press conference and Ohtani's 5 words that had traveled around the world in under an hour. She had seen him, and something had crossed her face before she could stop it. And now the rest of the world was catching up to what she had seen. Tonight, the surgery is over. The records are released. The images are out there. Ohtani has said what he is going to do. Not a question. Not a doubt. 5 words from a man who does not do doubt. I need to undergo treatment again. The only question left, the one that nobody in baseball can answer tonight, is what comes out the other side. And whether, when it does, it will still be the same Shohei Ohtani that walked into that operating room. The MRI has spoken. The records are public. The bruises are visible to the world. And somewhere inside a hospital, the greatest player alive is already planning his next move. We'll be watching.